I stood at the center of the crowded banquet hall, my heart racing with a mix of pride and anxiety. Just moments ago, my brother had delivered a biting little jab at my expense, his voice cutting through the clinking glasses and laughter. "Look at Captain Gabriella, all decked out in her fancy uniform. You'd think she was still playing soldier in her childhood dress-up box." The laughter that followed felt like daggers, spiraling through my chest and gripping at my lungs. Here I was, a 25-year-old staff sergeant in the U.S. Air Force, celebrating my 5-year anniversary in service, and my brother had just turned the night into a cruel little farce. I clenched my fists to steady myself, feeling the fabric of my dress uniform dig into my palms, and I took a shaky breath. As the room quieted down, I caught sight of handsome Navy sailors in crisp whites at the back of the hall. They were all tall and broad-shouldered, standing there like sentinels against the backdrop of laughter and clinking forks. I hadn't even noticed them walk in, but now my attention was pinned to them like a moth to a flame. A ripple of respect and recognition spread through the audience as the lead sailor barked an order, and I felt a strange warmth begin to rise up in my chest. "Captain on deck!" they shouted in unison. My breath caught, the air around me thickening as I felt their eyes on me. Somewhere between duty and camaraderie, their salute felt like an anchor in the turbulent waves of my emotions. The moment felt surreal, a life raft in a sea laden with my brother's ridicule. No matter how many times I prepared for nights like this, I knew I was different in a family that didn't quite understand what it meant to wear this uniform. The churning anxiety I felt earlier washed away like the tide pulling back under the command of something greater. Their respect and recognition were overwhelming. It ignited a fire within me. But my brother's laughter still echoed in my mind, leaving a bitter aftertaste. Why did it always feel like I had to prove myself to him? Why did he have to mock the very thing that made me proud? As the sailor's salute lingered in the air, I felt a sense of validation that I desperately needed. This wasn't just a party, it was a testament to the sacrifices and endeavors that had shaped me. I had stepped away from my childhood dreams and stepped into this world of discipline and resilience, and I wouldn't let my brother's sneering words dim that light. I needed to speak out, to reclaim my dignity. "Thank you for your service, sailors," I managed to say, my voice steady despite the tumult in my heart. It was almost like a declaration, a small act of defiance against that lingering doubt seeded by my brother's mockery. I took a moment to breathe in the respect I was being given, allowing it to drape over my shoulders like a mantle. I had not just devoted 5 years to my country, I had built a life around it, complete with the struggles and triumphs every soldier carried. I was no longer that little girl pretending to play war, I was a woman forged in the fires of service and sacrifice. And if they could stand and salute me, I could stand tall against the shadows of my past. Before I go on, subscribe to the channel. Here, we tell the untold stories of military women, courage, sacrifice, and truth. Your support helps more voices like mine be heard. The restaurant's warm ambience felt like a cocoon, with flickering candles casting gentle shadows on the walls. But the moment I sat down at that table, a knot twisted in my stomach. As my husband, Tom, reached for my hand, I could see the worry etched in his eyes. He wanted this anniversary to be perfect, but little did he know the storm brewing just beneath the surface. My brother had arrived, the thread of his sarcasm hanging over me like an uninvited cloud, ready to rain on what was supposed to be our celebration. The clinking of glasses and the murmur of conversations around us faded away as my brother, Jake, burst into laughter, making a show of how impressive it was that I was married to someone normal. The moment he said it, the air thickened. My cheeks burned with embarrassment, and I could see a shadow of hurt flicker across Tom's face. It was a cruel jab at my time in the military, as if being a staff sergeant wasn't a badge of honor but a reason for laughter. I felt the stares of nearby diners, their curious eyes prying into our dinner, as if they were watching a train wreck unfold in slow motion. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I had fought tougher battles in my life, faced challenges that would make most people crumble. Yet, here I was, caught off guard by my brother's mockery. It wasn't just about his words, It was the way they cut deeper than any training I had endured. I was proud of my service, of what I had accomplished, but why did it feel like so few understood me? My sense of belonging wavered, and I hated how easily Jake could make my skin crawl with just a few careless comments. I wanted so badly to stand up for myself, to expose the truth of who I was, not just a sister or a soldier, but a person capable of love and deserving of respect. Before I could gather my thoughts, something extraordinary happened. The restaurant's doors swung open, and in marched a group of sailors, at least 250 of them, clad in crisp Navy uniforms. My heart raced again, but this time it was different. They lined up in perfect formation, their faces resolute, standing at attention in the midst of our little chaos. Just when I thought I was lost in a sea of self-doubt, I heard it, "Captain on deck." Their voices resounded powerfully, cutting through the noise of my brother's disdain. In an instant, the air shifted again. My anxiety began to fade as pride flooded back into the room, not just for me, but for all of us who had sworn an oath to serve. The sight of those sailors transformed the atmosphere entirely. I felt the weight of their presence, the unspoken bond between those who had dedicated their lives to something greater than themselves. I glanced at Tom, his eyes wide and sparkling with recognition, and before I could think twice, I straightened up in my chair. It was a reminder of my journey, a reflection of the resilience I had built over years of service. Those moments felt like an anchor as I turned to Jake, ready to reclaim my narrative. With a renewed sense of strength, I was determined not to let the mockery define me or this day. I was more than just a sister, I was a soldier, an equal in a world where bravery meant standing tall, especially when the tides turned against you. The moment my brother's laughter cut through the convivial atmosphere of my anniversary dinner, I felt a shock rip through me, like the abrupt jolt of a military briefing turned upside down. I had just raised my glass, ready to toast to the life I had built with my husband, when Jason leaned back in his chair, a smug grin plastered across his face, proclaiming how someone in uniform shouldn't expect to find love. The laughter from the table was contagious, yet I felt frozen, a granite figure in the face of their mirth. It wasn't merely a jab, it was an all-too-familiar reminder of the scars I had fought to bury, not just for myself but for everyone at this moment. The shards of that memory bit into me, unwelcome and sharp. It took me back to my earliest days in training. Stepping off the bus, the adrenaline surged as I looked around at faces filled with equal parts fear and determination. I still remember the eyes of the squad, full of skepticism, and the whispers that followed me like shadows. "She'll crack under pressure," they said, a dark undercurrent to the camaraderie we were supposed to forge. I had faced those doubts head-on, shedding them like the way of an old uniform that no longer fit. Yet, hearing Jason's words felt like a time warp. I was that vulnerable girl again, standing in a world that somehow didn't believe I could belong. Back at the dinner, I felt a curtain drop over my heart. Jason could never understand the sacrifices that came with the title of staff sergeant or the resilience it takes to fight through judgments. I was proud to wear my uniform, to serve my country, and to stand tall among my peers. The laughter echoed in my ears, and I fought against the tide of emotions threatening to drown me. As I looked down at my untouched plate, I considered how far I had come since those early days, yet those jests from my brother felt like they had me spinning back into the past. The real memories flickered in my mind like old photographs, whispering of both strength and fragility. Then came the moment that changed everything. Just as I was about to respond, every intention of clapping back at Jason's mockery, the doors swung open, and in stepped a group of sailors adorned in their crisp, blue uniforms. A hush fell across the room, the laughter evaporating into stillness as they lined up by the entrance. I could see their chests swelling with pride before they called out in unison, "Captain on deck." That wasn't meant for me, but the significance hit me like a cannon blast. It wasn't just the honor they were showing their captain, it was a crescendo of respect towards all of us who wore a badge of duty. My breath hitched as they saluted, an unexpected vertical line forming in my throat. In that instant, my brother's earlier words dissolved into the background, mere echoes of a distant noise. I felt all the weight of my service and the roots of triumph rising within me. The soldiers around me were proud of the sacrifices we made, and they saw it reflected in their own faces. My husband glanced at me, his eyes wide with disbelief, and I could sense a swell of pride mirroring mine. Jason's laughter felt smaller now, insignificant against the backdrop of honor that filled the room. It wasn't about him or his jibes, it was about us, a community standing together, unyielding. That moment served as a clarion call, a reminder that we are far more than the mockery of the uninitiated. We are a force, and together, we rise above. My heart raced as I sat at the long table with my family, trying to focus on the laughter around me. It was our anniversary dinner, a celebration meant to honor love and commitment. But all I could think about was how my brother, Alex, had made a mockery of my service earlier in the evening. It wasn't the first time he had belittled my achievements, and the sting of his words echoed against the backdrop of what once felt like a supportive family. Each year that passed seemed to widen the chasm between us, a rift that once felt unimaginable at home. As I looked across the room at his smug expression, I could see the flicker of our childhood memories, those moments when we were thick as thieves, before everything got complicated by ambition and choices. Growing up, I was the little sister to the boy who could do no wrong in the eyes of my parents. Alex was a natural athlete, always the star on the field, while I was the girl who preferred books to ball games. I watched him achieve milestones that made our parents beam with pride, while I carved my own path, often overlooked and underestimated. The day I enlisted in the Air Force, I remember their faces. Alex's smirk was the hardest to swallow. "You? A soldier," he had scoffed. That moment sparked a tension that never truly receded, festering beneath the surface of our family gatherings like an unhealed wound. With time, the dynamics shifted. I thrived in my career, earning promotions and accolades that seemed to further irritate my brother. He often dismissed my accomplishments with jokes that cut deeper than I'd let on. "Must be nice to play dress-up in a uniform," he'd say, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I tried to brush off his comments, telling myself that it was just his way of coping with his own insecurities. But the truth was, each jab chipped away at my self-worth, a reminder that in his eyes, I was still just the little sister who was trying too hard to make a name for myself. As I sat there, the laughter of my family blending with the clinking of silverware, I felt a heaviness in my chest. I wanted to remember the good times, the days when Alex had my back, but they felt so distant now. My service was my pride, and yet the very people I sought validation from saw it only as a punchline. The idea of confronting him was paralyzing, the fear of escalating the conflict loomed large. Yet, I was tired of playing the role of the dutiful sister who smiled through pain and humor that stung. I longed to be seen for who I truly was, a strong, capable woman who had chosen to fight for something bigger than herself. And just when I thought I would let his comments go unchallenged, the room shifted. In walked the 250 Navy sailors, tall and proud, filling the space with an air of authority and respect. As they formed ranks and saluted, I felt the pulse of something deeper, an undeniable pride in my service that overshadowed Alex's mockery. "Captain on deck," rang out, and my heart swelled. In that moment, I realized that my worth was not defined by my brother's laughter. I might be struggling to find my place in my family, but out there, in a world that understood honor and sacrifice, I was recognized. The salute wasn't just for the officers, it was a reminder that I belonged, that I was more than his little sister, and that my journey as a staff sergeant was valid, meaningful, and deeply honorable. I stood at the edge of the banquet hall, my fingers tapping nervously against my champagne flute. The dim lights glimmered off the crystal, casting fleeting reflections on the faces of my friends and family gathered to celebrate my anniversary. Yet, as I scanned the sea of smiling faces, my brother's laughter rang out, a cruel reminder of the ridicule I had buried deep. "Are you sure you belong here, Gabby?" he mocked earlier that evening, as if my uniform somehow disqualified me from this moment. The sting of his words lingered in the air, heavy and suffocating. I had worked tirelessly to carve my own path, to earn my place in an unforgiving world, and yet, here I was, feeling smaller than I had ever felt before. In a room filled with laughter, his jibes echoed louder than anything else. I'd fought tooth and nail to rise through the ranks, to wear the insignia that came with the weight of responsibility and sacrifice. I didn't just survive, I thrived, surrounded by individuals who understood the true meaning of duty and honor. Yet, when my brother reduced my accomplishments to mere jokes, I felt the armor I wore begin to crack. It wasn't just a mockery of my military career, it was a rejection of my identity, my worth, and it left me questioning if I truly belonged among people I loved. My heart raced as I fought the urge to leave and hide, a soldier wanting to flee from the battlefield. As the evening progressed, I caught glimpses of my fellow service members mingling in the crowd. They were not just colleagues, they were my brothers and sisters in arms, who understood every sacrifice made and every challenge faced. My friend, Staff Sergeant Miller, was across the room, animatedly sharing war stories with a few civilians who watched him in awe. I felt a flicker of pride, a reminder of why I wore this uniform with honor. My life was more than my brother's teasing, it was forged in the fires of dedication and resilience. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I was not just a soldier, I was a leader, a mentor, and a fighter. When the moment came that would change everything, I heard it, the thunderous clap of boots against the floor. A wave of whispers cascaded through the crowd as the doors swung open, revealing a group of 250 Navy sailors, their blue uniforms stark against the pastel decor of the hall. "Captain on deck," they shouted in unison, their voices resonating with pride and absolute respect. I barely processed their presence as the entire room fell silent. My heart raced with a mix of disbelief and adrenaline. It felt as if the world had shifted on its axis. In that instant, I was no longer Gabriella, the sister who had just been mocked. I was Staff Sergeant Gabriella, part of a brotherhood that spanned across branches, fortified by loyalty and mutual respect. Watching the sailors stand resolutely, their salute directed at me, I felt a surge of validation wash over me. My brother's laughter faded into the background, replaced by the empowering reality that I had earned my place here. This wasn't just my anniversary dinner, it was a reminder of what I had accomplished in a world that often tried to diminish me. I returned the salute, my chest swelling with a mixture of pride and defiance. I was part of something greater, a mission far beyond my personal struggles. In a single moment, the weight of my worth was reaffirmed, igniting a spark within me. I was ready to prove that my journey, my resilience, and my dedication were not only valid but invaluable. I gripped my glass tightly, the weight of it grounding me as I fought back the sting of humiliation that threatened to erupt. My brother's mocking words echoed in my ears, a cruel reminder of the insecurities I thought I had buried long ago. "Look at you, Gabby, all dressed up like you're something special," he had said, laughter slicing through the celebratory atmosphere like a knife. The room had instantly gone quiet, my heart pounding with the judgment of every eye on me. I was brave enough to wear my uniform on an important occasion, my anniversary dinner with my husband, but here was my family, ready to tear me down. In that moment, I felt small, exposed, and utterly unworthy of being celebrated. But deep down, amidst the embarrassment, a flicker of defiance sparked. I had earned my stripes, literally and figuratively. I had faced challenges that would make the average person crumble. At 25, I was a staff sergeant in the U.S. Air Force, tasked with responsibilities that could affect lives. I had learned to stand my ground in the face of adversity, whether it was leading a team through a grueling deployment, managing the chaos of daily operations, or navigating the subtle, sometimes hostile dynamics of military life. I had developed a thick skin. My brother's words stung, but the thought of all I had accomplished soothed me like a warm blanket. I wouldn't let him or anyone else steal my moment. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly, forcing composure to replace the urge to retaliate. Instead, I shifted my focus to my husband, Reed, who sat across from me, offering a reassuring smile that spoke of love and understanding. His presence reminded me that not all family moments had to be toxic. He saw me, my courage and resilience, and I felt my shoulders settle slightly, the tension easing just enough for me to reclaim my voice. Before I could second-guess myself, I raised my glass in a toast, forcing a bright smile to mask the storm inside me. To the people who support us unconditionally, even when life gets tough, I declared, my voice steady despite my earlier turmoil. I heard clinking glasses and half-hearted cheers, but my brother only rolled his eyes. It was his way, endlessly critical, always ready to belittle. A lifetime of trying to prove I was more than what he saw washed over me like a wave. I wasn't going to let him derail me anymore. I leaned forward into the awkward silence and let the words rise up from the depths of my confidence. You know, some battles are fought daily, and those are the ones that matter the most. It's not about wearing a uniform or having a fancy title, it's about standing up for yourself and creating a life worth living. I may not fit your mold, but that doesn't make me any less worthy. To my surprise, a round of applause broke out, not just from Reed but from others at our table, people who understood something about overcoming struggles. Then, like a wave of solidarity, one by one, sailors in the back of the restaurant stood up. They turned to face us, their faces set in disciplined resolve. Captain on deck, they bellowed in unison, a spontaneous salute directed toward me, my heart swelling with an overwhelming mixture of pride and surprise. In that moment, my brother's laughter faded into the background, hushed, if only for a brief instance. I felt my identity as a soldier, a sergeant, and a woman come rushing back, bringing with it a new sense of empowerment. I realized that I was more than my brother's opinion, I was a part of something bigger, and I would not be silenced again. The evening had started with laughter and toasts, the kind of warmth that wrapped around me like a favorite sweater. My husband, Alex, stood beside me, his smile infectious, a beacon of love that grounded me amidst the chaos of family dynamics. But then, there was my brother, Mark. With his usual bravado and a twinkle in his eye, he launched into a story. It was a play-by-play of all the moments when I had stumbled growing up, underscored by an exaggerated tone that made the table erupt in laughter. The punchline, however, was aimed squarely at me, a clumsy rendition of my early days in the military, lost in the shuffle of boot camp. Each chuckle felt like a jab, striking at something deeper as I fought to mask my discomfort with a smile. Years ago, I might have shrunk back, but I had learned a thing or two about resilience. This wasn't the first time Mark had dug at my insecurities. As a kid, I felt invisible next to his charisma, twisted in the shadows of his jokes. But the Air Force had thrust me into challenges that tested my spirit and revealed strengths I hadn't known I had. I remembered long nights spent studying manuals, learning to stand tall during high-pressure situations, and the feeling of earning my stripes, literally. I had become a guardian of the sky, and with every successful mission, I carved out my own space in the world, one far removed from my brother's shadow. As the laughter faded and the conversation shifted, I felt a rush of determination surge within me. It was a voice I had cultivated through hard work and perseverance, one that reminded me of the countless hours spent training, learning, and growing. I cleared my throat, the table going quiet as I took my turn. I shared a story, not of failure, but of triumph. A memory from my first deployment, the adrenaline of taking off into hostile skies, the pride I felt when I returned safe with my team. I watched as Mark's laughter faded, replaced by a look of surprise, and then respect. It was empowering, a reminder that I wasn't just a punchline, I was so much more. The evening moved on, but my heart swelled with a new conviction. Alex caught my eye, pride shining in his gaze. As I shared more stories, weaving in moments of growth and personal victories, I felt the dinner transform from a gathering of shared history into a celebration of who I had become. I was a staff sergeant, serving my country and standing with pride among my peers. The nervous, unsure girl who used to let laughter belittle her had learned to stand her ground. And while Mark's jests cut deeper than he realized, they no longer defined me, they simply fueled my journey forward. As the dinner wound down, the clinking of glasses and warmth of family surrounded me, but the loudest sound wasn't the chatter, it was the echo of the Navy sailors as they entered the hall. When they stood in unison, saluting with a powerful shout of "Captain on deck," I felt an indescribable rush of belonging and pride. My heart raced, not just for the honor they bestowed but for the recognition of my own persistence. Growth, I realized, is not just about rising above, it's about claiming one's place and knowing that every challenge, every slight, is merely a step on the journey. In that moment, as I returned the salute, I understood that I was no longer seeking validation. I had claimed my identity and my place, and that was worth celebrating. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a time to honor the unconditional love Chris and I had built over the years. Our anniversary dinner had turned into an unexpected shambles when my brother decided to play the role of the jester, mocking my role in the military. I kept my smile plastered on, a reflex I had perfected through countless deployments and lengthy briefings. But beneath that exterior, my heart quivered, each jab from him landing like punches in a sparring match. "Oh, look at Gabriella, our brave little soldier, playing dress-up while we keep the world turning," he had laughed, and I felt the laughter ripple through the room, cloaking my own feelings in shame. It wasn't merely his words that stung, it was the realization that, in a way, he was right. I had often wondered if I was truly making a difference. Sitting there, I felt surrounded by an invisible wall, a barrier that separated me from the jovial conversations and the clinking of glasses celebrating love. My heart weighed heavy with memories of those I had lost in service, faces that danced behind my eyelids whenever I closed them. I thought of Marcus, my best friend who never returned from that last mission, and how his absence lingered like a phantom. Did my brother consider the sacrifices I made or the pressure I bore for all of us? How easy it was to mock from the sidelines while I bore the weight of serving my country, the guilt of surviving when so many didn't. The overwhelming craving for acknowledgement clashed with the realization that not everyone could understand my path. When the atmosphere turned sour, I took a deep breath, remembering what I'd learned in my training: stay calm, assess the situation. I felt the heat rise from my chest to my cheeks, but it wasn't just anger, it was an acute sense of loneliness. I thought of the camaraderie I had with my fellow service members. They understood the stakes, the fears, and the losses. They had been through the trenches with me, saw me at my vulnerable moments, and still carried me through. Yet here I was, surrounded by family who couldn't fully grasp the scars hidden beneath my uniform. It felt as if I were fighting a silent battle while everyone else enjoyed the show. Just when I was ready to stand and retreat into the solitude of my thoughts, the door swung open, and in walked a group of Navy sailors. I almost gasped when they marched in unannounced, their uniforms crisp and sharp, a symbol of pride and honor that resonated deep within me. I recognized the sharpness in their posture, the discipline ingrained in their every movement. Suddenly, the laughter faded, and the room went silent. I watched as the leading sailor raised his hand to his brow in salute, loudly declaring, "Captain on deck." My heart leaped, not for the rank but for the solidarity, the deep-rooted respect woven into that simple gesture. In that moment, I felt seen. It wasn't just a salute, it was an acknowledgement of my experience, of my fight. The room buzzed with confusion as guests turned to each other in disbelief. Meanwhile, the sailor's voice cut through the tension like a blade, holding firm against the waves of judgment and ridicule. I swallowed hard, aware that everything had changed. My brother's laughter faded into a mere whisper, overshadowed by the respect I had longed for. These sailors didn't mock my service, they celebrated it. I felt a flicker of pride reignite within me, reminding me that while I may have faced trials and loss, I was not alone in the battle. I stood quietly in the corner of the bustling banquet hall, my heart racing like the jet engines I often heard roaring overhead. The laughter and clinking of glasses felt distant, an echo of a world that seemed so far from mine at that moment. My brother, Mark, had just made a joke about me back at the table, something about me being more mission-focused than family-focused. The punchline received a hearty laugh from our parents, but it sliced through me like a low-flying bullet. Inside, I felt like I was in a dogfight, dodging emotional missiles aimed straight at my heart. Was that how they truly saw me? As just another cog in the military machine, always flying off into the blue, leaving family behind? The whirlwind of emotions swirled within me, but I kept my composure. I had trained myself to handle the chaos of 1,000 situations, but this was personal. I glanced at my husband, Aaron, who was caught up in conversation with some of his coworkers, blissfully unaware of the turmoil brewing inside me. He had been my rock since we met, encouraging me to chase my dreams while balancing the demands of service life. Yet, standing there, I felt as if I were a ghost haunting my own celebration, invisible to the very people who had once cheered for me. The weight of their expectations pressed down hard, but the weight of my own insecurities was heavier. As the evening wore on, a buzz of excitement rippled through the room. I turned to see a group of Navy sailors enter, their crisp uniforms and proud demeanor instantly commanding attention. I was taken aback when they stopped, lined up, and stood at attention in the middle of the room. It's difficult to describe the pride and surprise that washed over me, washing away the bitterness that had briefly consumed me. Someone in the back shouted, "Captain on deck," and before I knew it, everyone was standing, our family, my brother, even Aaron. It felt surreal to witness something I'd only seen on the parade grounds, and in that moment, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of belonging to something larger than myself. But the surprise didn't end there. One of the sailors stepped forward and saluted, addressing me directly. "Staff Sergeant Gabriella, we appreciate your service and leadership. Thank you for representing us so honorably." My heart skipped a beat. My brother fell silent, his earlier joke hanging in the air like a forgotten ghost. The recognition from these sailors, a collective gesture of respect, washed over me like a warm wave. No longer did I feel invisible. My service mattered, it was acknowledged in a room filled with my family, and suddenly, I felt the burden of doubt lift just enough to breathe. As the applause echoed throughout the hall, I searched for Mark's eyes. He looked different, humbled, even a bit regretful. I managed a small smile, hoping he could see the armor of self-worth I had donned in that moment. I turned my gaze back to the sailors, standing proudly in formation, and felt tears prick my eyes. They reminded me of the camaraderie I cherished in my own branch of service. In that space, all my struggles, the long nights, the sacrifices, the distance from home, they crystallized into a single undeniable truth: I was more than just a soldier. I was a leader, a sister, a friend, and at long last, I was seen. I still can't shake the embarrassment from my brother's joke at the anniversary dinner. The laughter of our guests mingled with the familiarity of family, but his words echoed louder. "Maybe if you'd spent as much time at home as you did in basic training, your marriage wouldn't need an intervention." I remember feeling frozen, like a soldier caught between orders, knowing I had to respond but also torn by the camaraderie and reverence I felt for my husband. I glanced across the table at him, the twinkle in his eyes dimming as he tried to mask his discomfort with a polite smile. A weight settled in my chest, and it felt like the crushing responsibility of my role in the Air Force, the pressure of being a leader yet simultaneously being ridiculed by my own kin. Not one to back down easily, I found my voice amidst the laughter and raised my chin, feeling the heat of indignation wash over me. "You know, Andrew," I said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes, "commitment looks different for everyone. Some of us serve the nation so that families can gather around tables like this one. Some of us make sacrifices for our dreams and our loved ones." My heart raced, not from the confrontation, but from the realization that this wasn't just about my brother's words, it was about my identity, the life I chose, and the love I had cultivated with my husband while serving. It was a delicate balance I worked hard to maintain, and hearing my brother dismiss it stung profoundly. The tension at the table shifted as guests exchanged uncertain glances, and I could feel the stakes rising. I took a breath, my military training grounding me as I stood firm. "You might not understand, but what I do matters. My work isn't just a job, it's part of who I am. I'm proud to serve, and I'm proud of the sacrifices I've made, even if that means missing a birthday or two," I continued, my voice steady yet charged. I could see Andrew's eyes narrow in disbelief. It was a direct confrontation, and I knew it would either unravel us or lay the groundwork for a deeper understanding. Then, as if the universe realigned, that very moment was interrupted by the unmistakable sound of boots marching. A group of around 250 Navy sailors in uniform had gathered on the street outside the restaurant, returning from a ceremony. In unison, they stopped and stood at attention, a collective presence that cut through our heated exchange. "Captain on deck," they called in unison, their voices resonating with a sense of pride and belonging that jolted me back into focus. I turned my head slightly, the sight of them both grounding and lifting me. They were a symbol of camaraderie, of shared sacrifice, and suddenly, I felt a rush of gratitude for my own place in uniform. In that moment, the laughter and mocking ceased. The room shifted, people stood a little taller, their previous amusement replaced with respect. My brother looked sheepish, his bravado extinguished. I was reminded of the weight of my service, the pride I carried not just as a staff sergeant, but as someone who fought for those moments of connection, however fleeting they may seem. Maybe Andrew would never fully understand, but as the sailors stood proud outside, I realized I wasn't just a soldier, I was a sister, a partner, and a woman carving her path. I would not allow my brother's mockery to overshadow that. I stood my ground, taking solace in the knowledge that there were others who shared this journey with me, and together, we would salute the struggles and triumphs of our lives. As I stood there, juggling the shame of my brother's remarks at our anniversary dinner with the pride swelling in me from the sea of Navy sailors, I felt a strange duality within. My heart was racing, not just from the embarrassment punctuated by laughter at my expense, but also from the unexpected honor they'd bestowed upon me. I glanced at my husband, Mark, who wore a tight smile as he tried to downplay my brother's teasing. He had always been my anchor, but tonight, even he seemed somewhat at a loss for words, caught between the familiar discomfort of family dynamics and the undeniable pride of my accomplishments as a staff sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. My brother had stood up, his voice booming as he recounted the times I'd played dress-up in uniform, as if my service was just a game to him. I could see a few family members giggling, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of how to respond. It sliced through me like a cold breeze on a winter night. I had worked tirelessly to earn my rank, to prove that I was as capable as any man, and yet, here I was, feeling like a little girl being mocked for her dreams. I tried to brush it off, suppressing the mix of anger and hurt swirling inside me, but the sting clung to my heart like a stubborn shadow. But just as the discomfort grew unbearable, like a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters, the announcement came. One of the sailors, who had evidently been informed of my brother's antics, stood tall and called for the attention of his comrades. The command echoed in the air, "Captain on deck." I felt my chest swell, not just from pride but from gratitude that these men and women recognized the significance of my service. Suddenly, the laughter and jeers fell silent, replaced by a resolute respect that filled the room. 250 uniforms stood, crisp and praiseworthy, saluting me. It was as if the very air changed, infusing my identity with a new weight that was honorable and fierce. In that moment, I regained my footing. I looked around the table at my scattered family, my brother's expression caught between confusion and realization. I could see small flickers of respect beginning to ignite in their eyes, even in the ones who had laughed the loudest. The awkwardness of my brother's jibe shrank in the light of these sailors' salute. It was as if they were not only standing for me but for all the women who had faced ridicule or skepticism in pursuit of their dreams. They reminded me that my journey was not just about family approval but about a deeper calling that transcended opinions and ignorance. After the moment passed, I felt an overwhelming urge to reaffirm my presence and my truth. I stood, my heart still thudding, and lifted my glass. To my brother, I began, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions. He may not understand my path, but he is family, and I love him. There was a brief pause, a shared breath, before I continued, and to the Navy, for your respect and camaraderie. You remind me of why I serve. The cheers that erupted were not just for me, they were a resounding affirmation of my journey, my identity, and the strength of all of us who serve in our armed forces, often struggling against misunderstandings from those closest to us. In that moment, I knew I was not alone. As I sat there, the laughter and teasing from my brother echoed in my mind, a cacophony that had once held so much power over me. During my anniversary dinner, his words stung and twisted my heart, igniting an old flame of insecurity that I thought I had extinguished. The familiar feeling of being belittled crept back in, coating the room like a thick fog. But instead of crumbling under the weight of his jests, I had stood tall, ignited by my own journey. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of my friends and family, I realized something profound. I no longer needed the approval of those who had belittled me. I had walked through too many trials, donned the uniform of a staff sergeant, and earned my place not just in the military but in life. The night had started with a celebration, a reminder of love, commitment, and the beautiful life my partner and I had built together. Yet, like a sudden storm, my brother's mockery threatened to overshadow it all. I could feel the familiar tension building in my chest. But as I glanced at my husband, the proud look in his eyes, and the support of my fellow servicemen around the table, the vision shifted. They were my true family, one made of honor, sacrifice, and unwavering respect. Their presence reminded me that I have fought for something far greater than moments of approval. I have battled for respect, integrity, and my own self-worth. With every laugh shared and every toast raised, I felt a shift within me, a liberation that was both foreign and exhilarating. I could hear the words of my mentors in my mind, reminding me that I was more than the sum of my brother's belittling words. I had come to understand that life is not a popularity contest but a service of courage and resilience. Those who mocked were merely reflections of their own insecurities, and I refused to be a passive audience anymore. I shook off their doubts like a heavy coat, unzipping the layers of judgment that had clung to me for too long. Then the moment crystallized, like a snapshot in time, when 250 sailors stood in unison, saluting and bellowing, "Captain on deck." My heart swelled and surged with pride. It wasn't just a title, it was a testament to everything I had endured and accomplished. This was my family, composed of individuals ready to stand by me, and in their ranks, I found my own strength reflected back at me. I smiled, not just at the recognition, but at the realization that I no longer needed to seek validation from those who would mock me. My worth was anchored in the respect I had earned and the bonds I had forged in service. As the applause faded, I took a deep breath, embracing the freedom that came with rejecting others' perceptions of me. I felt invincible, standing at the intersection of my past and present, ready to step boldly into whatever came next. With each passing year, I would continue to rise, grounded by my own accomplishments and surrounded by those who genuinely valued me. I would embrace my journey, knowing that I had transformed from the girl who looked for approval into the woman who now commands respect. And as I looked out at the sea of faces, the bright glow of the candles reflecting in their eyes, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be, a captain, not just in title but in spirit, ready to navigate whatever the future held. If you stayed with me until the end, thank you. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from.